Part 26. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 253. My aunt put on a thick padded jacket, and when she went out, she saw Mu Yangling playing with the mousetrap and asked, "You want to go into the mountains? Go into the mountains and set a few traps." Mu Yangling put the things in the back basket and put them away, then picked up a machete and a bundle of ropes on his back, stood up and said, "Anyway, there is no work in winter, so I will leave after I set the traps. Go get some firewood." On the day of the winter solstice, the Mu family moved into a new house. Now Mu Yangling lives in a house alone, and Bo Wen also lives in a house alone. Zai Yuheng and Zai Ulan originally lived separately, but it was too cold these 2 days and they lived together again. The firewood burned in this way is twice as much as before, so the firewood they prepared before was not enough. In the past few days, Zai Yuheng took Zai Ulan and Bowen to the foot of the mountain to collect firewood with the children in the village. But 2 days ago, a wild boar ran out of the mountain and almost injured the children. It happened that there were adults nearby. Throwing stones to drive away wild boars saved a few children. But Mu Yangling forbade them to collect firewood anymore. The climate in this winter is a bit abnormal, and the beasts in the mountains are restless. Who knows what will come out of the mountains next time? Just as Mu Yangling was about to go out with his things on his back, Old Man Sun rolled up his sleeves and came to look for her, bumped into her head on, and hurriedly asked, "Aling, you want to go into the mountains?" Mu Yangling nodded. "Grandpa Sun, what do you do?" There is something. Isn't this about the wild boar going down the mountain 2 days ago? I heard that someone in the next village was killed by the wild boar going down the mountain." Old Man Sun frowned, and said, "God doesn't know what happened. It's been almost a month since the winter solstice, there hasn't been a single snow, and the mountains are not flat anymore. The weather is getting colder every day, and everyone doesn't have enough firewood. Frozen to death." My aunt heard it in the yard, so she paced out with a handful of green onions, leaned against the wall and said, "Brother Sun, just tell me if you have anything to say, and you don't have to say these things in advance to hold my family Aling hostage, no matter what your name is." "What does she do?" "The first thing, our Mu family will not suffer." Yes, how can I let the big sister suffer?" Old Man Sun said with a smile. "Isn't Aling the only one in the village who can hunt and set some traps? So I want to ask Aling to set some traps on the outside of the mountain, the trap, so that you won't be afraid of big prey coming out. Everyone can safely chop some firewood outside. Of course, if you work hard in the village, the things in the trap will still belong to Aling. What do you think?" The aunt looked at Mu Yangling and asked, "The hunting trap is not difficult. You can learn it after watching it a few times. You won't steal Aling's craft later, right?" "That's definitely not possible. Everyone knows that the Mu family is a hunter. How can they steal your ability to survive?" Old Man Sun patted his chest and said, "Don't worry, if you have anything to do later, just tell them to do it. They shouldn't look at it. Yes, they will definitely not read it." Mu Yangling said with a smile, "Actually, it's nothing for them to learn my skills. Learning one more skill will also guarantee your survival. I have nothing to hide. You don't want to set a trap in the woods in a day or two? It's done. How about this? First you ask them to cut down a few sections of trees, as long as 3 feet long. I still have something to do today, and I'll teach you tomorrow." The aunt pulled Mu Yangling, and Mu Yangling patted her hand reassuringly. Old Man Sun said with a smile, Okay, I'll go and talk to everyone. Aling, I have no objection to you teaching these skills to your cousins, but why are you still teaching them to the villagers? In the future, everyone will be able to hunt. How can our family earn money?" "Don't worry, Auntie, even if I want to teach them, they won't be able to learn if they want to. Moreover, our family is now less and less dependent on hunting income, so it's okay to teach them." The aunt looked at her suspiciously. "That's definitely not the reason. To be honest, my aunt can still let you go. Mu Yangling just smiled, and said frankly, Auntie, the craftsmanship is not the last only if you hold it in your own hands, but it is best to spread it out, let everyone learn it, improve it, and then give it back to us. Of course, it's not about hunting, it would be bad if everyone learned how to hunt, and the wild animals in the woods should suffer. Then what do you want to do? Mu Yangling was silent for a while, and said, I have always felt that hunting and war have something in common. We live in the border now, and wars happen almost every year. Maybe the barbarians will rush to us at some point. I just hope that everyone can more capital to survive. And as Grandpa Sun said, this year is too cold, and everyone's firewood is not prepared enough. If we don't replenish it, we may really freeze to death. How can it be so fast? Before winter, every household has prepared enough firewood for the winter. Even if it is colder this year, there must be a lot left now. Where will it be used up? A person without long-term considerations must have near-term worries. Auntie, we can't wait until we run out of firewood before thinking about going up the mountain to collect firewood. Don't Ziyuheng and I go up the mountain to collect firewood every day now? We still have a room of firewood in our house. The aunt was silent. Mu Yangling said again, because it's not snowing now, everyone naturally transports firewood as much as possible to their homes. When the snow falls, the forest will be closed, and everyone will not be able to enter even if they want to. Okay, I know your kindness, go, but you have to be tougher, don't let them think that our Mu family is easy to take advantage of, and don't be as sexual as you used to be in Linchin village. Don't worry, Auntie, I know. Then I will go to the mountains first, and I won't come back for lunch at noon. I will eat in the mountains. There was no snow in the mountains, and there was a squeak sound when his feet stepped on the dry leaves. Mu Yangling went directly to the depths of the mountain forest to set up traps, and when they were done, it was almost noon. Mu Yangling raised his head and looked around for pheasants, wanting to grab one to fill his stomach. It's just that this kind of prey is a little hard to find in winter. This spring, the rabbits may be caught too hard, and even wild rabbits are rare in the forest. In the past, after winter, Mu Yangling could find prey as long as he was near the water source, but this year it has not snowed since winter. The water source in the forest is occupied by large animals, and many weak animals dare not go there. I didn't dare to go there, I don't know where they hid. To the south is the middle section of Mount Chu. Mu Yangling often hunts there. After thinking about it, she goes to the northwest. It is close to Lakong Mountain. Because there is not much vegetation on the mountain, she never goes there. Maybe she can go there today. Mu Yangling carried the basket on his back and walked there, when a pheasant flapped its wings and flew to the branch. Mu Yangling's eyes lit up, and just as he was about to draw an arrow to shoot it, the pheasant flew in the dense forest. Mu Yangling had no choice but to give up shooting with arrows, and ran to catch up. She held her breath and wanted to catch up with all her strength and then use the bow and arrow, but she felt that the dantian in her lower abdomen was slightly warm, and her steps were faster. He leaped forward lightly, but he didn't see the heaviness before. Mu Yangling's heart agitated, and she vaguely understood something. She ran after the pheasant, and when she encountered an obstacle, she leaped over and drove it from the depths of the kitchen mountain to the edge of the kitchen mountain. If that pheasant had any mental activity, it must have regretted it to death. This man just chased it and turned a blind eye to the passing roe deer and rabbits. This is how much hatred he has for it. Chi Heiran was lying on the ground staring at the deer salivating not far away. Hearing the movement, he sneaked over and saw Mu Yangling chasing a pheasant. Chi Heiran burst out laughing and stood up. He asked, "Why don't you shoot it? Do you have the leisure to chase it?" Mu Yangling stepped directly on the ground, jumped onto the branch where the pheasant was standing just now, bent his waist, dodged the branch blocking the way, and jumped down to continue chasing the pheasant. The smile on Chi Heiran's face paused, looking serious. He threw the bow and arrow in his hand to Fei-Bai, got up and chased after the man and the chicken. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 254. Fei-Bai opened his mouth wide and asked, "Master, are you not hunting anymore?" He turned back to look at the herd of deer, only to find that the deer they had waited for all morning had already run away in fright. He sighed in frustration and had no choice but to keep up. After all, Chi Heiran is familiar with lightness kung fu, coupled with deep internal strength. He followed Mu Yangling in a short while, and rushed to the front to watch her excitement. He watched Mu Yangling's movements carefully, and gradually felt the taste. Chi Heiran's talent in martial arts is already outstanding. When he saw that Mu Yangling's every jump had its own trajectory, and his footsteps became lighter, he knew that Mu Yangling had realized another rule. He once heard from his uncle that there are many ways to achieve lightness kung fu. One is that he practices internal strength in this way, then learns lightness kung fu, and then he can achieve it naturally, which is also a common perception. Another kind is to practice light work through physical exercise, such as tying heavy objects on the calves to practice jumping and running. Become light, so as to practice lightness. But this kind of lightness work is worse than internal force lightness work, but the benefits are also obvious. If the internal force is used up, the lightness work will not be able to be used. It is not like this kind of hard work. A part of it is there as long as it can be moved. But this kind of exercise method is too bitter, and it takes 10 years of persistence. Chi Heiran stared at Mu Yangling's pursuit with piercing eyes. Her method was different from the above two methods, but seemed to be a combination of the two. Although it was very subtle, he still felt the internal force brought out by her movements. She has developed her inner strength. Obviously, this method was realized by herself. The pheasant seemed to be unbearable, and flew outside with flapping wings. Mu Yangling chased after it. Behind this bush was Lakong Mountain. The weeds on Lakong Mountain were all dead, and only a few low trees grew sporadically. "Tree," the pheasant panicked and sent itself to death. Chi Heiran also flew out, followed by Mu Yangling. With his toes pointing a little on the rock, he rushed forward and held down the pheasant. The pheasant cried weakly twice, and then completely quieted down. Mu Yangling lay down on the stone tired and paralyzed, wiped his sweat, stretched out his hand, and handed the pheasant to Chi Heiran. "Take it, I want to rest." Chi Heiran took it and asked, "How did you come up with this exercise method?" "It happened by chance. I noticed it when I was chasing it just now. I thought it was my illusion a few days ago. It turns out that I really developed my internal strength. Although it has not been successful, but the habit has been formed. Every night before going to bed, Mu Yangling has to meditate and practice the inner strength method that has not made any progress. A few days ago, she felt a heat in her lower abdomen, thinking that she had developed her inner strength, and held her breath again. But she couldn't do anything, she just took it as her own illusion, and only today did she know it was true. Mu Yangling lay on the stone and looked at the blue sky and white clouds, and said, "I think I may have used the wrong method of internal force, otherwise why couldn't I hold my breath 2 days ago?" Chi Heiran smiled when he heard the words, "It's not that you made a mistake in the method, but that your internal strength is not enough to ventilate." Speaking of this, Chi Heiran became serious, and said, "Since you have developed your internal strength, it will be much smoother in the future, and if you persist every day, one day the fine rivers will merge into a big river." Mu Yangling sat up, and said with piercing eyes, "Don't worry, I have nothing else, but I don't lack persistence and perseverance. One day, I will practice the lightness kung fu of stepping on the snow without a trace." Chi Heiran touched her forehead. "I don't have a fever, why are you talking nonsense? You want to create this kind of lightness kung fu with your little internal strength? I have never heard of anyone whose lightness kung fu can step on the snow without any pain mark." Mu Yangling said blankly, isn't that what is written in the books? No one in the rivers and lakes can walk on the snow without a trace, and float on the water. Chi Heiran couldn't help laughing. I told you to read less scripts and you still didn't listen to them. They were written by people who don't understand, and I haven't seen such a character written in any scripts. There must be a place for support, like on water. Unless there are floating boards or stones in the water for support, how can people float on water? With your lightness skills, how far can you float on the water? If there is a good point of leverage on the shore, and if you leverage on the water again, you can jump 4 feet at most. Chi Heiran patted her on the head earnestly and said, so don't believe what is written in the script. Mu Yangling was not depressed, but said happily, this is good. I was worried that there would be such people in the world, so wouldn't we be very insecure? I am stronger than ordinary people. If I can practice lightness kung fu again, I will be able to do it in the future. You don't have to be afraid of people anymore. Chi Heiran said solemnly, if you want to practice as soon as possible, today's method is actually very good. You can practice lightness while exercising your internal force. In the future, you can also practice with sandbags on your feet, and the effect will only be better. Mu Yangling couldn't help but patted the stone under him, and said enthusiastically, then help me make a plan, and by the way, teach me how to use this internal energy carefully. Dare to speak, for fear that if you speak, you will lose your temper. This is not difficult for Chi Heiran. He raised the pheasant in his hand and said, then shall we go back first or roast it first? Eat first and then go back. I'm starving to death. Mu Yangling had been busy all morning, and chasing this pheasant with all his attention took a lot of mind and energy, and now he just feels hungry. I can't move. Chi Heiran found a rope from her back basket and tied the poor pheasant, and said to Mu Yangling, then I'll go and pick up some dry firewood, you wait here. Mu Yangling nodded eagerly. When Fei Bai managed to catch up with him, the two had already started a fire in the lee of a rock, and Mu Yangling was watching Chi Heiran deal with the pheasant eagerly. Fei Bai was so heartbroken when he ran. Chi Heiran ordered him when he saw him, where's the kettle? Get it quickly. Fei Bai couldn't breathe well, but he still carried Chi Heiran's bow and arrow and put it on the ground, and took out the kettle to clean the pheasant for Chi Heiran. Fei Bai looked at his master, then at Miss Mu, thinking about the food intake of the two of them. He looked at the pheasant that had been slaughtered pitifully. He was hungry too. Chi Heiran couldn't think of this question, but Mu Yangling thought of it, so she searched in the back basket, took out the sleeve arrow that Chi Heiran gave her before, gave it to Fei Bai, and said, take it to catch a pheasant or a hare, this should help make it. Yes, thank you Miss Mu. Fei Bai took it with a smile, and fumbled for it preciously. This sleeve arrow is precious. Chi Heiran glanced at him and said, don't break things, go and come back quickly. Fei Bai responded, and happily ran into the woods. Mu Yangling saw that Chi Heiran was smearing ingredients on the pheasant in a strange way, so he wanted to step forward to help him, but when he stood up, the stone behind him fell down with a clatter, which shocked the two of them. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 255. Chi Heiran jumped on the rock to have a look, pointing at the big rock and twitching the corner of his mouth. He asked, isn't this the rock you were lying on? You just smashed it into pieces with your palm. Mu Yangling opened his mouth wide and said, I have controlled my strength. Could it be that my strength has increased again? Mu Yangling looked down at the stones, picked them up and weighed them, and said, why do I think these stones look familiar? You just lay on it, doesn't it look familiar? Chi Heiran reached out and patted the stone. Seeing that it stopped falling, he didn't take it to heart, squatted down and continued to roast his pheasant. Mu Yangling, who was going to help, held the stone and frowned suspiciously. The stones were all similar in size, but why was she interested in this stone? Mu Yangling looked down at the black and red stone in his hand in a daze. Fei Bai quickly came back with a hare and a pheasant, and returned the sleeve arrow to Mu Yangling. Ms. Mu, thanks to your sleeve arrow, this year's prey is much more difficult than last year. It took me a long time to catch up with these two. Only. There has been no snow this year, and there was a drought before, so the prey is harder to hunt than in previous years. Mu Yangling put the few stones aside alone, took the pheasant from Chi Heiran's hand, and said, "Let me do it." Chi Heiran was very happy, so he left it to Mu Yangling, and sat on the side waiting. There will be a big temple fair in Hanshong Mansion on the 5th day of next month, will you go? What am I going to do at the temple fair? Mu Yangling said in a daze. Besides, Hanshong Mansion is so far away from my home, so I don't worry about them being at home. Then take them all with you, Chi Heiran said, as it should. There's not much work to do in winter, you can still visit your father when you go to Hanshong Mansion. Mu Yangling's eyes lit up, and he asked, "My father is in Hanshong Mansion?" Chi Heiran nodded. Mu Yangling said a little angrily, "Then why don't you let him take a normal 10-day rest? My father hasn't come home for 3 months, and Bosi and Kijia don't remember him. He has a mission, so he can't leave Hanshong Mansion easily. If you want to see him, I can arrange 1 or 2 for you when you go to Hanshong Mansion, but it's impossible for him to come." Mu Yangling was silent for a moment, then asked, "Is the temple fair in Hanshong Mansion very lively?" Chi Heiran nodded. "Don't you have a lot of fur goods in your house? It just so happened to take advantage of this temple fair to make a move. Don't worry, if you go to Hanshong Mansion, I will take care of the food and lodging." Mu Yangling looked at him strangely. "Why are you so keen on us going to Hanshong Mansion?" Chi Heiran just glanced at Fei Bai. Fei Bai could only pick up the pheasant and the rabbit and deal with it silently. Chi Heiran then said in a low voice, "Shall we make another vote before the Chinese New Year?" Mu Yangling also lowered his voice and said, "Are you a gangster and addicted?" Mu Yangling refused. "Wouldn't it be automatically delivered to your door when you go at this time? You are not allowed to mess around, Brother Chi will be angry. This time we are robbing the gold soldiers." Mu Yangling snorted, and said, "The time distance is too short, it will make people think, and it will be bad if it spreads to the Great Zhou. The emperors of the kingdom of Jin and Xixia are not afraid of war, but our emperor of the Great Zhou likes to beg, and, when the time comes, the old coins and offerings lost are enough for you to buy a big race course. Now that Xixia and Jin kingdom are at war, they may not think of us," Chi Heiran retorted. "Then you can't go. It's rare for the border to be peaceful for a period of time. Not only the people need to recuperate, but the soldiers also need it. In addition, the Chinese New Year is coming soon. Are you willing to send funeral newspapers to people's families at this time?" Mu Yangling persuaded. "What's more, for the racecourse, robbing horses can only solve the urgent need. The real right way is to buy horses with money, and in 2 or 3 years, the first batch of horses can be mated, and the racecourse will be able to form a scale. But the kingdom of Jin and Xixia may not let us live comfortably for 2 or 3 years." Chi Heiran still felt that we should quickly regain the lost ground. Mu Yangling said, "I can't eat hot tofu in a hurry. General Yuan is almost 40 years old. He is not in a hurry, and Brother Chi is not in a hurry. What are you in a hurry?" She looked to the north and said in a low voice, "Daddy Zhou is not afraid of a protracted war. Compared with Xixia and Jin, Great Zhou is more affordable. Besides, even if you regain the lost ground, the emperor may let you lose it. General Yuan is a lesson. When the time comes, the price you will pay for a quick battle, not only will you not be rewarded, but you will lose more because of it. In this case, it is better to take it back slowly, take back a little bit a year, stick to the place you take back, and take a step forward after recharging your energy. I don't believe it. After 10 or 20 years, this homeland will not be taken back. Chi Heiran's face became cold and solemn. You are coaxing me. The battlefield changes rapidly, and the state affairs are different from day to day. Who knows what will happen tomorrow? Maybe in a few years, the world will change. Mu Yangling looked at him in surprise, and asked, why don't you shy away from it? I thought you wanted to be loyal to the Lord. I serve the country loyally, and the people of the world belong to the world. Chi Heiran looked at Mu Yangling with piercing eyes, and said, I know you are the same as me. If you don't tell me, you can't hide it from me. Mu Yangling smiled. She did not say anything like the great Zhou dynasty is not long in front of them, because the common people would scold the emperor and ministers, but they would not say that their country would perish. That would be treasonous words. Mu Yangling lowered his voice and asked with a chuckle, then what do you think? Chi Heiran felt pain and sore in his heart, and more of it was anger. The emperor allowed the officials to plunder the people like this, and would rather build a large building than pay the military salary. How many years can such a great week last? It's not been a day or two since Dezhou was like this, and hasn't it continued for 100 years? Chi Heiran said angrily, it was all in exchange for money. The year-old coins and silk tea and porcelain that Dazhu exported to neighboring countries every year accounted for a large share of the national treasury, and then the imperial court passed this burden on to the common people. Although Chi Heiran didn't know much, he often listened to Zijin and the eldest brother discussed, and he also knew a lot about this operation. Then do you think Dezhou will perish at the hands of other countries? Chi Heiran glanced at Mu Yangling, otherwise you think so? I thought that Dezhou died in the hands of the people and himself, and your common god. Mu Yangling said in a low voice, the most difficult part of Dezhou's journey in the 5 years after next year, if it is passed, it may last for decades or even hundreds of years, but if it cannot be passed, the great Zhou will disappear. Chi Heiran opened his mouth wide and looked at her with wide eyes. Although he said that Dezhou would perish, it was more out of anger and venting his bleak future for the country. Maybe Dezhou would perish, but Chi Heiran did not feel that I will experience it. He blinked, closed his mouth and looked at Mu Yangling seriously for a moment. Seeing that she was serious, he moved to Mu Yangling's side. Tell me. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 256. After all, Chi Heiran was young, he was neglected by his father since he was a child, and he didn't like to study. When he was in Linen Mansion, he only loved to practice martial arts. His biggest wish was to become a general under his brother's hands when he grew up, and follow him back to his homeland. The idea of loyalty to the emperor is more in the left ear and out in the right ear. He is not obsessed with the emperor like most people, but he is more loyal to the country. If Chi Ziyuan heard Mu Yangling say such a thing, he would definitely reprimand him, but if other officials heard it, he might arrest Mu Yangling. Chi Heiran was like this, and Mu Yangling did not hide it, and told him his opinion. Great Zhou seems to be weak among Xixia, Jingguo, and Tubo, but our Dezhou is rich in supplies, and we have Generals Yuan, General Yang, and I wish the generals to guard the frontiers, and their countries are not at peace. It is very difficult to destroy the Great Zhou from the outside, so if the Great Zhou is to perish, it can only be destroyed from the inside. Mu Yangling sighed and said, that's why I said that God didn't give Guos a way out. Judging from the current climate, next year our Xinyuan mansion may not have good weather. There are still several places that are as abnormal as Xingzhou mansion if the peasants fail in their harvests, but their taxes are not reduced. If the imperial court is still desperately increasing taxes at this time, what do you think will happen if the people have no way out? Chi Heiran squatted on the ground and meditated. Mu Yangling turned over the pheasant deftly in his hands. When he felt that it was cooked, he tore a piece and put it in his mouth. Then he divided a pheasant into 2 halves, gave Chi Heiran half, and leaned against the stone while eating. He said, so I think if I can make money now, I should make more money and buy more food for storage. This world is really going to be chaotic. I can protect my family, and I won't starve them. Chi Heiran has been eating the pheasant in his hand in silence. Fei Bai felt safe, so he sneaked back again, found a stick and started roasting hare and pheasant. After the three of them ate and drank enough, Chi Heiran got up and clapped his hands and said, "Let's go, Fei Bai and I will help you collect firewood." Mu Yangling asked with a smile, "How do you know I'm going to collect firewood? Which time in the past few days have you gone down the mountain without dragging a few bundles of firewood?" Mu Yangling tilted his head to look at him. "How do you know? Is there anything on Grandpa's territory that Grandpa doesn't know about?" Mu Yangling just smiled, and after hitting 4 bundles of firewood, Mu Yangling returned to the place just now, picked up a few stones and put them in Chi Heiran's arms, saying, "Since you are not on your side if you know something, then go and find out who is the descendant of this stone, and don't forget to thank me later." After speaking, he strung up the 4 bundles of firewood with sticks and walked away. "Miss Mu, I'll help you get tied up." Fei Bai hurriedly chased after him. Mu Yangling waved his hand and said, "No, you should help your father pick up a few more stones." Fei Bai scratched his head and asked, "Fourth young master, when did Miss Mu like to joke so much?" Chi Heiran hugged the stone in his arms and kicked him. "Why are you poor? Why don't you hurry up and pick up a few more stones?" Fei Bai jumped to avoid it, looked puzzled at the mountain of stones, and muttered, "What's the use of picking up the stones on this mountain?" But he still went to pick up the stones obediently. Seeing the thing Chi Heiran was holding in his arms, he picked black and red stones specifically for this color, and in the end the two carried back a dozen stones. Chi Heiran put the stones on the desk, stared at them with his chin propped up, and asked, "Apart from being ugly, what's so special about these stones?" Fei Bai stood aside and shook his head. "Master, Miss Mu might be joking with you. Its descendants. Aren't the descendants of stones still stones? Could it be that gold can grow out of stones?" Chi Heiran just said a word inadvertently, but his eyes lit up, and he patted the table and shouted, "Yes, gold is not. Did it just grow out of the stone?" Fei Bai stammered, "Fourth young master, you don't really believe it, do you? This stone looks no different from ordinary stones, and the gold is yellow. You see, this stone is black and red." Chi Heiran rolled his eyes and scolded, "You are stupider than the master. Gold can grow out of stones, so can't other things grow? For example, copper, iron, and tin, don't they all come from it came out of a rock? Go and get the box, I'll put it in and show it to my elder brother." Seeing that Chi Heiran was serious, Fei Bai had no choice but to turn around and bring a box over, worried, "Master, what if this stone kills off children and grandchildren? Will the eldest son blame us for looking for trouble for nothing? My luck is good. Whoever cuts off children and grandchildren can't be cut off by the stone. There are so many stones on Lakong Mountain. Could it be that every one of them has the sterility disease?" He said to him viciously, "If these few stones can't make children and grandchildren, you can move rocks up the mountain for me until there is a place where I can have children and grandchildren." Fei Bai hugged the stone and cried, "Miss Mu, you've hurt me so badly now, baby, good stone, you must have many children and grandchildren." Fan Zijin saw the scene just after opening the door, couldn't help laughing out loud, and asked, "How can this stone have many children and grandchildren?" Yan Mo also laughed and teased Fei Bai, "I guess brother Fei Bai gave birth to him." "That's not true, brother Fei Bai is a man. Could it be that she gave birth to brother Fei Bai?" "Go, why are you fooling around?" Fei Bai packed the stone into a box and said to Fan Zijin, "Master Baiao, it's just in time for you to come." If Miss Mu said a word, our master would be bewildered, thinking that this stone can give birth to gold, silver or iron and copper. Fan Zijin was taken aback, looked down at the stone carefully, and said for a while, "Don't think about gold and silver, but iron is a possibility." Chi Heiran burst out laughing, looked at Fei Bai proudly and said, "How about it, is what you said right?" Fei Bai said in a daze, "Can you really give birth to offspring?" Fan Zijin murmured, don't jump to conclusions so early, first take the things to Zhou Mansion to show the big cousin. Brother Rong is very knowledgeable, maybe he can know. By the way, where did you get this stone? Chi Heiran pointed outside and said, it's right in front of our camp. Fan Zijin tilted his head, in the field. Was it thrown by someone? Chi Heiran showed his white teeth, and his eyes were full of pride. Luo Kongshan, a mountain of stones. Fan Zijin thought that Lakong Mountain was full of rocks, with only some weeds and a few scattered low trees growing on it, so it might indeed be a mine. But Lakong Mountain is so close to the county seat, so it has been undiscovered for so many years. Chi Heiran closed the box and said, it's true or not, let's go and verify it. Fan Zijin thought about it too, and after a few people tidied up, they got into the carriage and rushed to Zhou Mansion. Seeing Fei Bai and Yan Mo carrying the boxes, the soldiers outside thought it was the little general who wanted to give the general some kind of gift. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 257. Chi Ziyuan raised his eyebrows when he saw his younger brother carrying such a big box in, and looked at them leisurely. Rong Xian glanced at Chi Ziyuan, who was smiling and silent, and asked with a smile, Heiran, what good things did Zijin send your elder brother? Chi Heiran put the box on Chi Ziyuan's desk, and Fan Zijin hurriedly moved Chi Ziyuan's official documents and other things aside. Fei Bai and Yan Mo couldn't help shrinking their necks when they saw it, and they all hid outside. The young master and the others were too courageous. If this matter is not certain, they dared to move the important documents of the young master, and moved a few big stones to the place. On the desk. Sure enough, no matter how stable and capable the two young masters were outside, when they came to the eldest son, they were still like seeing their father's children. Fei Bai and Yan Mo looked at each other, both felt that this metaphor was very appropriate. They exchanged winks and stood guard outside the study. Chi Ziyuan's eyes became more interested. Rong Xian also looked at it curiously. They all thought that the two children brought Chi Ziyuan something good, but who knew that when the box was opened, there were about 10 stones inside. Chi Ziyuan looked at Chi Heiran, carefully scrutinized his expression, and made sure that he wasn't playing tricks on him. Rong Xian coughed lightly, tried his best to hold back his smile and turned his head away. After a moment, he felt that his face was serious enough, so he turned to face Chi Heiran and Fan Zijin squarely, and asked, what is this? Chi Ziyuan glared at him, and if he wanted to pretend, he had to pretend a little. The smile in his eyes was almost overflowing. What's the use of having a straight face to hide it? Chi Ziyuan glanced at his official document and asked, I also want to know what this is. This is a stone. Chi Heiran looked at Chi Ziyuan expectantly. Brother, can't you see what this is? Seeing that Chi Ziyuan was about to explode, Fan Zijin hurriedly added, Big cousin, what Heiran means is that these stones may be unusual, and asked if you could tell what they were. Chi Ziyuan said angrily, you guys brought the things, you don't even know, how can I know what it is? Ha ha. Rong Xian couldn't help laughing anymore, supported the table and asked, what do you think these stones are? Seeing Rong Xian laughing like this, Chi Heiran and Fan Zijin were a little depressed. We thought it was an ore. Mu Yangling gave me the stone and asked me what is the descendant of this stone. Zijin also said that the stone might be iron ore. Chi Heiran became more depressed as he spoke, this is just an ordinary stone. As he said that, he sat down on the chair next to him. I rushed to Fukan in such a hurry, I thought I found a mountain of treasure. Chi Ziyuan and Rong Xian looked at each other, put away the smiles on their faces, and looked down at the stones in the box. Rong Xian even picked up one and looked at it carefully. Fan Zijin was also depressed at first, but seeing them like this, his eyes lit up again, and he and Chi Heiran looked at them expectantly. Chi Ziyuan is not good at these things, and after reading it for a long time, he didn't see any difference. He turned his head to look at Rong Xian. The stone looks like what is written in the book. He pondered for a moment, and said, I'm not sure it's or now, I have to test it. Heiran, what did Miss Mew say? Compared to Chi Heiran and Fan Zijian, he and Chi Ziyuan were obviously more willing to believe in Mu Yangling. Chi Heiran was a little unconvinced, but he still thought about it carefully. At that time, she said that the stone looked familiar, but she was lying on it before. Accidentally slapped that rock into pieces, of course it looked familiar, and I didn't take it seriously, but she looked at those rocks for a long time, and asked me to take them with me before we parted. Let me look for their descendants. Chi Heiran stared and said, how can stones have descendants? If there are, isn't it still a stone? Unless it is ore, it produces gold and silver or something. Chi Ziyuan and Rong Xian looked at each other. Chi Ziyuan said in a deep voice, Ah Xian, you should conduct a test immediately, don't spread this matter beforehand. Heiran, how many people know about this matter? It's just us, Fei Bai and Yan Mo, Mu Yangling is not counted. Mu Yangling knows the seriousness, and her mouth is tight. She won't say anything. There's no need to tell me. Go and call Fei Bai and Yan Mo in. Chi Ziyuan instructed Fei Bai and Yan Mo, and left with the box of stones and Rong Xian. Chi Heiran watched them disappear. Zijian, do you think it could be ore? I don't know, but since Mu Yangling said that, it's very likely. Even though he didn't like Mu Yangling, Fan Zijian had to admit that she was reliable. If it's iron ore, Chi Heiran drooled, then we won't need to ask the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Households for our weapons from now on. Difficult, Fan Zijian said, the iron ore should belong to the Imperial Court. Even if it is proved to be iron ore, the elder cousin may not keep it, unless, Fan Zijian looked at Chi Heiran, spit out two words, private mining. Chi Heiran frowned, then my 5th battalion is going to move. This silly boy never focuses on the right things. Fan Zijian was so angry that he didn't want to talk to him, so he turned around and left. Hey, what are you doing? Eat, you are not hungry. Only then did Chi Heiran realize that it was already dark outside, and his stomach growled. He hurriedly caught up with Fan Zijian, I'll go too. When Chi Ziyuan and Rong Xian reappeared after disappearing for a day and a half, their eyes were bloodshot, but their emotions were very high. Chi Ziyuan slipped Chi Heiran and Fan Zijian into the study, lowered his voice and said excitedly, is it iron mine, or iron ore with a high iron content? By the way Heiran, where did you find it? Rong Xian also looked at him excitedly. On Lakong Mountain. Lakong Mountain, Rong Xian's eyes brightened, he punched and said, that's right, Lakong Mountain is full of stones, and only some weeds and low shrubs grow on the mountain, which is one of the manifestations of iron mines. Is the whole mountain full of iron mines? Chi Ziyuan asked. Rong Xian, you can only know this after field investigation. Heiran, what does Miss Mew say? She didn't say anything, but there are many rocks like this on the mountain. That's great, Ziyuan. If the iron ore on Lakong Mountain is rich, it will be a great achievement after reporting it to the court. Chi Ziyuan also showed a smile, nodded and said, survey first, and then I will write the notes. Chi Heiran was dissatisfied and said, why do we have to report to the Imperial Court? Brother, my 5th battalion is at the foot of Lakong Mountain, and it was built with great difficulty. Once the Imperial Court comes, I will definitely have to move. Where can I find such a good one, where to go? But Fan Zijian said, big cousin, there is some confusion in the court now. I heard that many aristocratic families have colluded with officials to mine mines privately. It is not certain whether this mine will fall into the hands of the court if it is reported to the court. Why don't we report this to the court first, put the matter aside and find out the situation on the mountain first? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 258. Rong Xian thought that the application for armaments would always be delayed again and again, pondered for a moment, and said, "Chint, what Zijin and Heiran said are all right, let's put this matter aside, and don't rush to report it. 5. The camp's field is all there, but we plan to use it to grow corn next year, so it's not certain that the land is still ours after the report." Qi Ziyuan knew what Rong Xian and the others were thinking. He looked at his younger brother and Zijin, waved and said, "Okay, it's none of your business, go and rest." "Brother," Qi Heiran was about to say something, but was stopped by Fan Zijin, so he had no choice but to swallow the words that came to his lips, and exited with Fan Zijin. When the people left, Qi Ziyuan sat down on the chair and said with a headache, "I know what you mean. If it wasn't for iron ore, I might have swallowed it myself, but we can't touch gold, silver, iron, and copper." "Yes, Jinyu, don't forget, I am the general who leads the army. As long as I get involved in this, even if the court only hears the slightest rumor, a charge of rebellion will not escape. Generals are the most taboo nowadays, and things like gold, silver, copper, and iron are sensitive in themselves. If a sensitive person touches something sensitive, even if he doesn't have that idea himself, the emperor will definitely kill him." Qi Ziyuan only wanted to have a smooth official career and regain his homeland, but he didn't want to rebel. Rong Xian was silent for a moment, then smiled and said, "I understand, it's not that we don't report it now, but we haven't confirmed the news yet, so we don't report it. Chint, Heiran's 5th Battalion is not dispensable now, even if it is in order to keep the land under the 5th Battalion, we just need not touch these ores." "Let me think about it," Qi Ziyuan said a little tiredly. Rong Xian got up. "You've been up all day and all night, go rest first, I'll go back to sleep too." Qi Ziyuan nodded. Rong Xian came out, turned around and went to Qi Heiran's place. Fan Zijin was also in his room. Both of them looked at him eagerly. Rong Xian smiled and said, "Your elder brother agrees to think about it, Heiran, although I will go carefully. I have surveyed Lakong Mountain, but from what you said and the performance of Lakong Mountain, there should be a lot of mineral deposits. Although we don't report it, we don't know how to mine it. Get rid of the rocks on the mountain." "Brother Rong, don't worry, I will make people look good." "Okay, then I'll go back and rest first, and I'll take someone to the mountain to have a look in 2 days, and I'd better find a good excuse." Qi Heiran rolled his eyes and said, "Why don't we go hunting? There are a lot of prey on Mount Chu, we can go into the mountain to hunt deer." "That's a good excuse. I'll tell you about it later." Rong Xian said goodbye and left. He also had a room of his own in the general's residence house. But after really lying on the bed, he couldn't fall asleep again. Ziyuan is determined to recover the country, but Rong Xian himself does not have such confidence. The emperor has always been jealous of military generals. General Yuan was born in a poor family and has no siblings. What's more, Qi Ziyuan has a family. His younger brother is quite talented in war, and his family is the Zhu family who holds military power in his hands. The emperor is afraid that he will be even more worried about using it. Rong Xian was Qi Ziyuan's military advisor, so he naturally wanted to think more about Xieying and Qi Ziyuan. If they could hold an iron ore in their hands, they would be less subject to the imperial court. Mu Yangling didn't know that the few stones she asked Qi Heiran to bring could lead to so many things. She was leading people to set traps in the forest, because she wanted to stop big beasts, and the area was too big, so she had to. There are many traps laid out. Mu Yangling explained to them while arranging, and when the last trap was set, Mu Yangling straightened up and said, "Okay, I don't know if I can stop all the beasts, but it should be useful. But if you go into the mountain, the best way to collect firewood is to go into the mountains in groups, not too many, 5 to 10 people in a team, so that the number of people can be guaranteed, and no one will be lost." "I don't know. Even if there are many people entering the mountain, as long as they encounter ferocious beasts, there will still be casualties. Old Man Sun frowned and said, I'm afraid of wild beasts hurting people now. There are not many strong men left in our village. If something happens to someone's family, they won't be able to save it in time. Mu Yangling said, an ordinary ferocious beast, such as a wild boar, as long as you don't provoke it, it will not take the initiative to attack people. If you encounter a wolf, then show your momentum first, and let people shout loudly. I'm usually in the village or in the woods, as long as I hear it, I will rush over immediately. If you encounter Xiangzizi and the female tiger, don't call me, just spread out and run for your life. I don't have that ability, but I guess the big guy your luck won't be so bad. Everyone laughed, and Bowen ran up from the mountain panting, shouting, Sister, sister. Mu Yangling turned around and asked, What's the matter? Sister, go down the mountain quickly, General Qi and the others are here and calling you. Old Man Sun's eyes lit up, he hurriedly pushed Mu Yangling and said, Then Aling, go quickly, we'll just take care of this thing. Then be careful, don't step on your own trap. Don't worry, go quickly, don't make the general wait too long. Old Man Sun and the big guy watched Mu Yangling and his brother leave. Some people envied and said, the relationship between Aling and General Qi's family is really good. Not only the little general often comes to see her, but also General Qi always goes to Mu's house when he comes over. Take a look, I heard that Mu Shi is now in the Hanshong Mansion's junior general's position. Isn't it? Do you think there is anyone in our village who doesn't go home for 3 months? Mu Shi is now being reused in Hanshong Mansion, and I'm afraid he won't come back once in half a year. Hey, you said that Mu Shi won't have another home in Hanshong Mansion, right? Someone asked gloatingly. Do you think Mu Shi is like you? You don't see Mu Shi hurting his daughter-in-law to the eyeballs. Hey, I'm afraid it will melt in my mouth. Speaking of Mu Shi's daughter-in-law, I've been a neighbor for a year now, and I haven't seen what she really looks like. Last time their family held a first-year ceremony, she would either stay in the kitchen and surround her in the back room after she came out. They were all from the Liu family, and I saw a head outside. Hey, has any of you seen Mu Shi's wife? Old Man Sun looked at them coolly and said, Tell me, keep telling me, Mu Yangling's ears are sharp. If she hears this, you don't want to live. The crowd fell silent for a moment, and someone laughed and said, Uncle Sun, isn't this a joke? A group of old men got together, and besides talking about the work in the field, wouldn't they also have to talk about women? Old Man Sun snorted coldly, and said, Don't blame me for not reminding you, the eldest girl of the Mu family is not good-tempered, she usually smiles and doesn't care about you, it's because she hasn't encountered anything that makes her care. If she cares, get up, don't think about Ning, and her cousin, her mouth is like a knife, you can say what you want, and wait until I leave. After finishing speaking, he left with his hands behind his back. As soon as Old Man Sun left, everyone winked and didn't dare to continue this topic, so they packed their things and went down the mountain. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 259. Qi Ziyuan was leading someone to sit at Mu's house. He visited Mu's new house and said with a smile, This house is well done, is it warm? It's quite warm. Shu Wanyang made tea for Qi Ziyuan, and asked with a smile, Is the general here to see Aling? You don't need to be so polite, auntie, just call me Ziyuan. Qi Ziyuan paused and said, My nephew's name is Chint, you can call me by your name. Shu Wanyang glanced at the things Qi Ziyuan brought, and was a little unsure of what he meant. Is this a family relationship between the two families? But the husband is just a soldier under Qi Heiran, and although the daughter has a better relationship with Qi Heiran, the Mu family's family background is too poor. Shu Wanyang was still in doubt. Qi Ziyuan straightened his back, leaned forward slightly and said, Aunt Mu, Chind is here this time to make the two families formally reunited. Seeing Xu Huanyang looking at him warily, he smiled slightly and said, Uncle Mu is very capable, and this child, Ling, is smarter. Our two families have been together for a long time in the past 2 years. The Mu family should have a certain understanding of my Qi family, right? I like this child, Ling, very much. Just like a sister. Xu Huanyang tensed her heartstrings and asked, so? With a smile in Qi Ziyuan's eyes, he looked at Xu Huanyang seriously and said, I'm busy with business, and I'm in Fukan, so I can't help taking care of Heiran. That child is a bully with a stubborn temper. He doesn't listen to anyone, so it's me, and what his cousin Zijin said can reach his ears better, and Aling has a good relationship with him, so he can still listen to what he said, so I want to ask my aunt and Aling to help me pay more attention to this child in the future. If you do something out of line, please advise me. He said he was asking Xu Huanyang and Mu Yangling to pay attention, but in fact he was just asking Mu Yangling alone. Xu Huanyang breathed a sigh of relief, and smiled and said, General, don't worry, I will tell Aling. In fact, I think the little general is quite sensible. He's just a child, it's not worth Aunt Mu calling him like that, just call him Heiran from now on. As he spoke, he looked at Fei Bai, who immediately handed over the gifts he had prepared before, 2 high-quality crystal emerald green ones jade pendants, 3 fair and flawless jade plagues, and a pair of shiny white jade bracelets. The jade plagues are for Boan and Bosi, the jade plagues are for Ziyuheng Ziulan and Kijia, and the jade bracelet is for Mu Yangling. Once these tributes are accepted, the relationship between the Mu Qi family will be different in the future. They will be friends in the world, and from the Mu family's side, they will be regarded as high-ranking. Xu Huanyang just took over after a short pause, but in fact she couldn't help but not take over. The Mu family was born dependent on the Qi family, and it was already a gift that the Qi family was willing to let go of their identities and interact with each other on an equal footing. Xu Huanyang smiled slightly after accepting the gift, then I will rely on the old to sell the old, and my aunt will call you Jin from now on. With a smile in his eyes, Qi Ziyuan got up and saluted Xu Huanyang. When Mu Yangling ran in, she happened to see this scene. She scratched her head in confusion and asked, What's wrong? Qi Ziyuan turned to look at her, and asked with a smile on his face, Aling is back. Did you see Heiran outside? No, brother Qi, why are you here? I came to Chushan Mountain to hunt, and Heiran said that if he wanted to enter the mountain, he had to look for you, so I came to look for you. Qi Heiran and Fan Zijin were watching Heijun in the backyard. Hearing the voice in front, they got up and came out. Seeing Rong Xian standing alone in the yard looking up at the sky, they also looked up at the sky. They didn't see anything for a long time, and looked away. It was only then that Rong Xian was looking at them with interest. Qi Heiran, brother Rong, what are you looking at? Look at the sky. Fan Zijin glanced at the sky again and asked, What's wrong with the sky? The sky doesn't have eyes. Rong Xian turned and walked into the room, saying, Okay, go in, Miss Mu has come back. By the way, now that the Mu and Qi families are family friends, you have to treat the Mu family with me. Be respectful, or be careful that your elder brother will deal with you later. While talking, Mu Yangling came out with Qi Ziyuan, carrying a bow and arrow. Aren't you going to hunt? Let's go. Xu Huanyang rushed out and said, Let's eat first before going. No need, we're going to cook some food in the mountains, Qi Ziyuan said. It's getting late, we're going into the mountains now, and we probably won't come back at night. Don't worry, Auntie, we'll take good care of Aling. Xu Huanyang didn't expect to spend the night in the mountains while hunting. After all, her daughter is a girl, so how convenient is this? She hurriedly turned to look at her daughter. But Mu Yangling waved his hand and said, Mom, go back quickly, the people brought by Big Brother Qi let them live in the front yard, and I will stay in the woods for one night at most. It's fine. Seeing her daughter's calm expression, Xu Wanyang obviously made up her mind. Then be careful, she watched them leave helplessly, still feeling a little uneasy in her heart. Why did Qi Ziyuan suddenly think of making the two families become family friends? Qi Ziyuan didn't bring many people into the mountain, except for Rong Suanhairan and Zijin. There were only two young men, Fabianmo, two guards, and an old man who kept bowing his head and not saying a word. Mu Yangling looked at the old man a few more times. He looked to be in his 40s, but he was energetic and bright-eyed, and he was in good health. Mu Yangling glanced at his siblings, paused his footsteps heading south, turned in one direction and said, "Brother Qi, let's go up the mountain from there. I rarely go to that forest, and there should be a lot of prey. That is the place where Kitchen Mountain and Lakong Mountain meet." "What an exquisite girl." Qi Ziyuan smiled slightly, and said with a smile in his eyes, "You are the guide, so we naturally listen to you." Qi Heiran couldn't help but roll his eyes. There were just a few of them standing in the endless fields. No one could eavesdrop. Everyone knew what they were going to do. They just said that it would be fine to go to Lakong Mountain to see the minerals. Why bother? Looking for such a reason? Fan Zijin poked him with his elbow, telling him not to talk too much, but to follow honestly. Mu Yangling led them into the mountain, but went straight in, and continued to go down when they entered the deep forest. Qi Heiran wiped the sweat from his forehead and asked, "Why do you want to go in?" Mu Yangling said, "The Kitchen Mountain is not only long enough, but also wide enough, of course we have to go down." "Are you going to pass through Mount Chu?" Qi Heiran stared and said, "The territory of the Kingdom of Jin is after Mount Chu. This piece of Mount Chu is not short. Have you walked out for 2 days? And there is no way." "I didn't say I'm going to go through Mount Chu, I'm just taking you to the other side of Lakong Mountain." Now that he was in the deep forest, Mu Yangling didn't like to play the game anymore, so he said directly, "Lakong Mountain is not small, and it's as long as it is. Not to mention, the width is half of this mountain range, and after that there is another mountain range. Don't you guys want to check the situation of the mineral deposits? Then you have to read it. Now Lakong Mountain is almost equivalent to the Naked Mountain, and it is obvious for people to stand on it." Mu Yangling looked up and looked around, found the mark he made and said, "Let's go, we will reach a junction not far away, we will go out from there, it is just past the top of Lakong Mountain, and our exit from there is just blocked figure, no one will notice." Qi Ziyuan looked carefully, and finally found a mark in an inconspicuous place on the ground. Only then did he know that Mu Yangling had done his homework in advance. He asked, "Aling, did you already know that this is an iron mine? The reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 260. Mu Yangling shook his head, "I don't know, I seldom come here, the last time I came here with Heiran, I found those stones." Mu Yangling paused for a moment and smiled, "At that time, I just thought those stones looked familiar, I thought about it for a long time before I remembered the iron ore that was written in the book, but I couldn't guarantee it, so I asked Heiran to take it back and have a look." "Then why did you come to explore the way ahead of time?" "That's not easy." "She must have felt in her heart that there is a high possibility that the stone is iron ore. We will definitely come back to find her at that time, so she should do some homework in advance. Anyway, she has to go into the forest to hunt every day, so she just dropped by at that time." "All right," Qi Heiran frowned and said, "Brother, don't ask me any more questions, let's hurry up and make some food after we go out, I'm hungry." Qi Ziyuan glared at his younger brother with hatred. Mu Yangling pursed his lips and smiled, and walked ahead to lead the way. When they came out of the woods, it was on the other side of Lakong Mountain, and the old man took 2 guards to go into the mountain. Qi Ziyuan glanced at him, waved his hand and said, "Okay, let them go and see, let's hunt some prey first, come fill your belly." Fan Zijin looked at Qi Heiran and Mu Yangling, and Mu Yangling picked up his bow and arrow and said with a smile, "Sit here first, I'll go hunting." Chi Heiran immediately grabbed his own bow and arrow, jumped off the rock and said, "I'll go with you." Chi Ziyuan glanced at them, waved his hands and said with a smile, "Okay, you go, we will light a fire here and wait for you." Chi Heiran and Mu Yangling went into the woods together. Fan Zijian picked up a leather water bottle and said, "Big cousin, I'll go to see if there is any water nearby. Bring Fibei and Yanmo. If you can't find them, come back." Aling has 2 cans of water in his back basket, which should be enough if you save money. "No," Rongxian said with a smile, "we still have to stay here for a day and a night. This little water is not enough for so many people. Let's look for a water source. It doesn't matter if you can't find it. Miss Mu is familiar with the forest. Go back and ask her, maybe she knows. Just you love cleanliness. I didn't see you being so particular about cleanliness when you were marching and fighting. That's because I have no conditions and I have to adapt. Since there may be better conditions now, why should I give in?" Rongxian looked at a corner of the mountain and gestured, "I can bear it. I can bear it. He's not as particular as you are. It's no worse than our marching and fighting." Chi Ziyuan waved Fan Zijian to take Fabian Mo away, and he and Rongxian asked while picking up firewood, "Lakong Mountain not small, how long do you think the secret can be kept? Hao Ran's 5th Battalion is here, and Xingzhou Mansion is also the territory of our West Camp. As long as we want to defend it, we can defend it." Mu Yangling led Chi Heiran through the forest, and finally squatted on the grass looking at a trace nearby, and asked, "Is the roe deer okay? One is enough for our group to eat for a day. My elder brother has a big appetite. There are so many of us, and 1 roe deer is enough for 1 meal. How can we eat for a day? Besides, you are not tired of eating only roe deer," Chi Heiran said in a low voice, "I want to eat venison. No, it took too long to hunt deer, and where can I find the deer?" She pointed to the traces on the ground and said, "I can only find roe deer. If you want to eat venison, next time you go into the mountains, come on, let's go." Chi Heiran could only follow, muttering as he walked, "I will ask my elder brother to let me go hunting in the mountains tomorrow, and we don't know how to explore minerals, so what's the use of following? Besides, we are using an excuse to go hunting in the mountains. You can't be empty-handed, right?" "You're right, you can talk to Brother Chi after you go out." Mu Yangling pulled Chi Heiran, hid behind a tree, and looked out. A roe deer was grazing with its head down, and looked around vigilantly from time to time. Seeing that the other party was as quiet as before, he lowered his head to graze grass again. Mu Yangling looked at Chi Heiran. Chi Heiran took an arrow and put it on the bow, and was about to leave the string, when the roe deer ran away suddenly as if frightened, and Mu Yangling rushed after him without thinking. Chi Heiran cursed in a low voice, and ran after him. He was faster than Mu Yangling. After a few light leaps, he jumped over Mu Yangling and chased after him. The arrow on the bow left the string and shot straight into the roe deer's neck. The roe deer was hit and fell to the ground, raised his head slightly and wailed, struggled a few times and died. Chi Heiran handed the bow and arrow to Mu Yangling, carried the roe deer on his back, and said, "Let's go." "Mu Yangling, let me recite it, I am stronger." "No, I'm a man, how can I let you carry this on your back? Go away. Don't dawdle." Mu Yangling saw that he looked decent, but his stern round face was slightly childish, so he couldn't help but pursed his lips into a smile, answered happily, picked up his bow and arrow and followed behind him. Chi Heiran walked for a while, then stopped suddenly, and said in a muffled voice, "How can I talk to you when you stand behind? Go ahead." Mu Yangling could only walk forward and asked, "What do you want to tell me?" Chi Heiran breathed a sigh of relief, thought for a long time, and asked, "Didn't I ask you last time if you would go to the temple fair in Hanshong Mansion? How? Have you decided? I asked my mother, and she said go, as long as you can arrange for us to meet my father, then we will hire a carriage and go to Hans Hong Mansion for a few days before returning. That's right, it's so boring to stay in one place all the time. You don't need to hire a carriage, just use our chi mansions, and go with us when the time comes. However, the ugly words are up front. Although I went to Hans Hong Mansion, I won't do that kind of business with you. Understood, I understand. My elder brother also disagrees. Chi Heiran was a little disappointed, and regretted, I have almost 400 horses now. As long as I have more than 100 horses, I can build a cavalry battalion. When the two walked out of the forest, Fan Zijian had already filled the water and came back. Qi Ziyuan also raised the fire. Qi Heiran threw the roe deer to the ground and asked, "Where is the water? If it's not far away, let's take the roe deer there to deal with it." Got it? No, there are often ferocious beasts infesting there. What should I do if I smell the smell of blood and rush over? Mu Yangling said, "Pick up a quick stone and put it there. I will peel and shave it. Even if there is not much water, I can clean it up." Qi Ziyuan kicked his younger brother and said, "Go help, learn a little bit, and you will need it for marching and fighting in the future." Qi Heiran drew his dagger to help, and when they skewered the roe deer on a stick and hung it over the fire to roast, Mr. Chen also came back with 2 guards, each carrying several stones. Qi Ziyuan hurriedly went up to pick it up in person. Mr. Chen hugged all the things for him, took a look at the roe deer on the fire, and said, "You guys will enjoy it, but this roe deer is old and not tasty, and now we have to count the grasslands. The yellow sheep on the table is the most delicious, not only fat, but also tender. Whether it is stewed, fried or roasted, it is delicious, and it is even more delicious if you add some chili and cumin." Mu Yangling's eyes widened. Cumin. Mr. Chen looked at Mu Yangling, smiled slightly, and said, "Young lady, don't you recognize it? That stuff came from overseas along with the corn and chili peppers. It's a pity, because of the encumbrance of corn, it came along with it. All the other things have been laid down in the abyss. In fact, I think cumin is quite delicious, but the big guys are not used to it." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 261. Except for him, no one sitting here has eaten the things he said. Mu Yangling has eaten them in his previous life, but he has never even seen them in this life. She is not particularly interested in cumin. What she is interested in is chili, and she loved spicy food in her previous life. "Mr. Chen, do you have these things on your body now?" Mu Yangling once asked merchants about chili peppers. Many people knew that, even the merchants from Sichuan and Guizhou liked to eat them, but because they knew that people in the north didn't like them, they didn't bring any seeds with them. Some people took them with them. "The one with chili powder, but just eat it by yourself. The most important thing is that what Mu Yangling wants is the seeds, not the mashed chili powder after frying." Mr. Chen smiled, turned around to get the cloth bag he was carrying, and said with a smile, "Don't tell me, I really have it on me." He took out his things, and a cloth bag contained not only chili powder and cumin, but also salt and even a small bottle of sauce. Mu Yangling was speechless. "Mr. Chen, you really have a complete set of things." "I'm used to it. I travel all over the country. Sometimes I go out for a few months or even a year. When I can't find a store or a village, I have to sleep in the wild. Naturally, I have to carry the seasoning bag with me." Although Mu Yangling also brought a seasoning packet, it was just oil and salt, and if there was too much, there would be no more. She brought Mr. Chen's things over, found a sunken stone and washed it clean, then poured some oil into it, added salt, chili pepper and Mr. Chen's sauce, then found a branch, took out a short knife and smashed it. The ends were divided into strands, and Mr. Chen said in amazement, "Young lady is good at swordsmanship." "This is all developed by making brushes in the wild." Mu Yangling waved his hand, shook off the broken wire, and then used the newly made brush dipped in the seasoning to brush on the roe deer meat, turning while brushing. Her strength big, she can do it with one hand, which requires the cooperation of two people to complete, which made Mr. Chen look at her several times. Qi Ziyuan and the others were no longer surprised, and even the two guards calmly turned their heads away after just a glance. The roe deer meat was roasted quickly, the oil was roasted, and the aroma continued to come out through the layer of meat brushed by Mu Yangling. Even Qi Ziyuan, who was not too hungry, and Rongxian, who was more particular, stopped. After talking, they all sat around. Qi Heiran squatted beside Mu Yangling to help her carry the stone, watching eagerly. Seeing that he couldn't move his eyes, Mu Yangling glanced at Qi Ziyuan, and stuffed a piece of him into his mouth with a razor blade. It was already dusk, and the temperature dropped rapidly, but just like that, Qi Heiran was also scalded. Then I squatted down and ate with my mouth puffed out. The slightly spicy stimulation exploded on the taste buds. He looked at Mu Yangling with shining eyes, and said in a low voice, "It's delicious." Fan Zijin glared at the two of them angrily. Qi Ziyuan and Rongxian pretended not to see it. Mr. Chen looked at Qi Heiran and then at Mu Yangling, shook his head and laughed, and sat on the rock with his eyes closed. Seeing Fan Zijin staring at him, Qi Heiran said to Mu Yangling, "Give some to Zijin." Zijin snorted coldly. "Is he angry because of this?" "He is because." Fan Zijin's heart skipped a beat. Suddenly he didn't know why he was angry. Anyway, he was angry. Mu Yangling glanced at him, pretending he didn't hear. Qi Ziyuan and the others smiled and said, "Mr. Chen, Brother Qi, all right, let's gather around and eat." Everyone has short knives. Even Mr. Chen pulled out a knife from his waist, so they cut and ate with their own knives, grilled while eating. Mu Yangling and Qi Heiran helped to brush the seasoning and turning around. I was so busy that I was sweating on the tip of my nose after a while. Sitting beside Qi Heiran, Fan Zijin suddenly found that he was excluded from the atmosphere of the two of them, which had never happened before. When Qi Ziyuan looked over, he saw that Zijin's face seemed to be not good. He looked at Heiran and Mu Yangling along his eyes, and saw that the two of them cooperated well. The younger brother cut a piece of flesh for Mu Yangling from time to time. "Stuff it into your mouth, turn the stick in your hand, and brush the seasoning on it." After working for a while, Mu Yangling would also cut some pieces of meat for his younger brother, or wipe the sweat off his forehead. Qi Ziyuan looked away in silence, and after a while he shook his head and laughed, thinking so much for what? Now he hasn't talked about getting married yet, and his younger brother is still young. Let's see if they get back together in a few years. Rongxian found that Qi Ziyuan didn't listen to what he was saying, so he bumped into him and asked, "What are you thinking?" "Nothing, what did you just say?" Rongxian looked at Qi Heiran and Mu Yangling following his gaze just now. Mr. Chen said that the area he walked in this afternoon is full of iron ore, but how much of it needs to be dug down to get it right, I know, and the place to go is not far away. Lakong Mountain is not small. If we dig further down, I'm afraid we won't be able to finish it tomorrow. Ziyuan, we can't leave Xieying for too long. We'll go back tomorrow, and we'll just send 2 more people over to help." "No need," Mr. Chen said, "it's enough to have the help of these 2 little brothers. General Qi, if there are many people who know a secret, it is no longer a secret." Qi Ziyuan smiled, "As long as Mr. Chen is not afraid of hard work, there is no problem on our side." Mr. Chen waved his hand and said, "I'm used to this kind of life, and you sent me 2 more people, so it's not hard work." Qi Ziyuan got up and bowed, then Ziyuan thanked Mr. Chen here first. Mr. Chen waved his hand, turned around and smiled at Mu Yangling, "Little girl, brush a little more chili on my side, It's not spicy enough. Chi Xiaoyuan and the others are used to eating milder flavors, and this spiciness is just right for them. At this time, they are already sweating profusely from eating, and they can't help being speechless when they hear that Mr. Chen wants to add more spiciness. Mu Yangling didn't dare to eat too spicy. After all, her stomach hadn't eaten chili in 10 years. Most of the spicy food she ate was ginger. Mu Yangling went to Mr. Chen's side and brushed a layer of red chili powder on him, and asked, "Do you want to sprinkle some cumin?" Old Mr. Chen looked at her in surprise. "Little girl knows how to eat these two things. I think you are very proficient in pairing them, but don't people in Xinzhou Prefecture don't like to eat them? Some people don't even listen to them." Heard about it? Mu Yangling smiled and said, "My mother knows, and I often deal with those merchants, and I heard from them that I know how to eat these two things." Although Mr. Chen didn't believe it in his heart, he didn't ask any further. Brother Chi Xiaoyuan trusted her, so why should he worry about it for them? Rong Xian glanced at Chi Xiaoyuan. Chi Xiaoyuan shook his head slightly. Rong Xian didn't speak anymore, and Chi Heiran and Fan Zijin were used to Mu Yangling knowing things that others didn't. Everyone camped here at night. Rong Xian and Chi Xiaoyuan stood on a high place and looked down at them setting up the tent, and said, "Ms. Mu is obviously just a hunter's daughter, but she can always know things that others don't. I heard that Heiran's scout battalion was practiced with her help. The reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 262. Chi Xiaoyuan smiled and asked, "What are you worried about?" Rong Xian glanced at him and said, "You are kind-hearted. The Mu family has its own secrets. As long as they are harmless to us, there is no need to search for them." Chi Xiaoyuan looked down at Mu Yangling and the three of them, and said, "Mu Yangling has a good heart. Take it easy." Yes, Heiran has grown a lot in the past 2 years, and Zijin has not continued to grow crooked, so you plan to continue to ignore the letters between your father and Mr. Fan and keep them here. Chi Xiaoyuan's eyes turned cold. Should we let them go back and be bullied? They are doing nothing every day and causing trouble. Stay here. Thinking that his younger brother was devoted to the military camp and regaining his homeland, and Zijin had his own direction, Chi Xiaoyuan couldn't help laughing out loud. Well, these two children have really acted like adults in the past 2 years. Although there is a suspicion of spoiling the seedlings, Chi Xiaoyuan decided to keep the two of them here. He didn't want to see two playboys when he returned to the capital. Everyone spent the night in the tent, and early the next morning, Chi Xiaoyuan asked someone to pack up. They were going to go hunting in the mountains. Since it is an excuse to hunt, it is necessary to bring out some prey. Mu Yangling was in charge of leading the way. When they left the mountain in the afternoon, everyone's hands were empty. Mu Yangling dragged a deer on the improvised plank, and carried a wild boar on his shoulders. Chi Xiaoyuan and Chi Heiran also carried a deer. Even Rong Xian Fan Zijin didn't have time on hand. They all carried some small prey. After sending the things back to Mu's house, Chi Xiaoyuan burst out laughing, and said happily, "Sure enough, hunting has never been so enjoyable before. No wonder Heiran always asks you to hunt. Aling, next time I have time, Big Brother Chi will return to you. How about you come to hunt and show us the way?" Mu Yangling nodded with a smile. "Okay, Fei Bai, go get someone to bring the prey back." Chi Xiaoyuan only chose a deer and some small prey, leaving the rest to Mu Yangling. But Mu Yangling waved his hand and said, "Brother Chi, you don't need to leave me so many things. My family can't finish eating so many prey, so I have to take them out and sell them. Why don't you take more and give some to the soldiers? It is good." As he spoke, he went forward and picked a fat and tender deer and carried it aside, and then went up to pick some small prey, all of which were tender. "Okay, if Brother Chi doesn't mind me being picky, I will stay these, take the rest back." Chi Xiaoyuan saw that she was chosen from home's favorite food, so he was not polite to him, and felt relieved. so he nodded and smiled and said, "Then I'll take your favor, and I'll take the rest back." Xu Huanyang has already cooked some dishes while they were talking. "Children, come and eat, I made bone soup in the morning, and now I have been stewing it on a slow fire, drink a bowl to warm up." "Thank you," and just as everyone was about to enter the house, someone outside shouted anxiously, Brother Heron, you are finally back." Everyone turned their heads to look out, and saw Songji with a small beard rushing in with a follower. Mu Yangling and Fan Zijian couldn't hold back, and burst out laughing with a puchi. A smile also flashed across Qi Ziyuan's eyes, and then he cupped his hands with a straight face and said, "So it's County Magistrate Song. Why is County Magistrate Song looking for my younger brother?" Songji's eyes glued to Qi Heron saw Qi Ziyuan and the others, and he felt a little embarrassed, but it was only for a moment, and he said with a shy smile, "Brother is here too, it's a pleasure to meet you." Qi Heron twitched the corner of his mouth. His elder brother is 8 or 9 years younger than him, how could he be ashamed? "Brother Song, what do you want from me?" Songji let out a breath, and after contemplating for a while, when he was about to speak, Ziyuheng came out of the room and said, "Brother Qi, my cousin asked you to come in, it's cold outside, if you have something to say in the room, drink, it's all warmed up for you." Songji's long simmering emotions dissipated immediately. Qi Ziyuan and Rongxian couldn't help feeling amused. "Magistrate Song, let's talk in the room if you have anything to do." The two took the lead into the room. The food was already set on the table in the main room, and everyone sat down, but Mu Yangling was about to turn around and go to the kitchen. Qi Ziyuan glanced and saw that Xu Huanyang was not in the main room, so he knew that she was avoiding suspicion, so he called Mu Yangling to stop. "Aling, sit down and eat too, you've been busy for a long time." Mu Yangling just smiled, "Eat it, I'll go and clean up the prey. My mother must have left something delicious for me in the kitchen, so I won't grab it from you." Qi Ziyuan didn't force it. Mu Yangling called Fei Bai and Yan Mo out, and said, "Go to the kitchen and eat. Miss Mu, tell us what you want to do." Okay, this is my home, I'm going to starve myself. Hurry up and eat, and serve your master after eating." Fei Bai and Yan Mo responded with a smile, then turned and left. While picking up the prey, Mu Yangling listened to the voices in the room. Songji had been waiting for Qi Heron for a whole day. As soon as they entered the mountain, he came back. He came to Qi Heron to ask for corn seeds. As soon as the news of the corn news came out, he was also emotional, but then the servants took away several carts of seeds, and then the Shen family took another batch, and people from Xinyuan Mansion and other places were taken away from Xieying. After some, he reckoned in his own mind that the remaining seeds would be enough for Xieying to plant by themselves, so he stopped thinking about asking for seeds. If he doesn't plant next year, and the year after that, he just has to wait another year. But this year, since the beginning of winter, there hasn't been a single snowfall. In addition to the previous drought, Songji didn't dare to get lucky. He can ignore other places, but the people of Mingshui County recognize him as a parent official, so they can only come to Qi Heron to ask for seeds with an old face. Qi Heron looked at his elder brother when he heard the words. He knew that his elder brother specially set aside a share of seeds for the people, not only the people in Xingzhou Prefecture, but also the people in Hanzhong Prefecture, but because the county magistrates of the counties and the prefects of the state capital did not find it, Qi Ziyuan didn't mention it when he came to the door. At this moment, Qi Heron suddenly understood that the elder brother didn't want to give them the seeds for nothing, so he had to make them pay some price. Qi Heron didn't know what the elder brother wanted, so he pushed the matter to the elder brother, saying, "Brother Song, the seeds are in my elder brother's hands, you should beg my elder brother," and Qi Xiu smiled shyly. "Yuandeo, brother Song is close to me, and he helped me a lot when I first moved to Mingshui County, so why don't you help him?" Chi Ziyuan pretended to stare at his younger brother. Song Ji heaved a sigh of relief, and said with a smile, "That's what a younger brother should do. Brother Heiran and I hit it off right away, and we share similar interests. If we can help, we will naturally help."